I think the one thing that you can do from a communication standpoint, we actually mentioned earlier, and that is to ask people what they heard.
Yeah.
Because that will make sure that you're on the same page and that you're clear. And an interesting way to do that is if you're in a meeting with someone, let's say you're sitting across the table from them and you're having this meeting, just push a sheet of paper over to them and say, all right, write down the top 3 things that you just heard me say. And number one, the reaction on their face will totally amuse you. And then secondly, you'll be amused by what they write down, because usually it's not even close to what you were actually saying. And I think just if you were to do that in a corporation or a one-on-one environment, you'll get to see the gaps that exist in communication. And so the key to being successful in communication is just closing that gap between what's said and what's heard.
This is the Brandon Smith Show, and I'm your host, Brandon Smith, and the entire purpose of this show is one singular thing, and that's to help you live a life that much more free from dysfunction. So our topic today is communication, and I know that's a big, broad topic, but we're going to talk about communication at the workplace in every way you can think about it. So how do you deliver maybe formal presentations and communicate when you've got to get your message heard by senior leaders or by your team? How do you have those informal conversations and communicate it more effectively? I mean, I can tell you just from my experience, there's a huge need out there,
yes,
particularly today. And so to guide us on this journey, I'm really excited to introduce our guest, Dez Thornton. Dez, you asked me, I said, Dez, what title do you want to go by? And you said, surprise me. So communication guru,
wow,
master practitioner,
ooh,
and just overall wise giver of advice for all of us in the workplace on how to communicate more effectively. How about that as a title?
I like you. Thank you for setting the bar so low.
You're welcome, Des. You're welcome. Well, what I love about all the stuff you've done, so I got to see you present. I know a lot about kind of your story, and I would like you to at least share with my listeners a little bit about kind of how you got doing this. But what I love is, I mean, it covers a lot of things for you, but you're focused. I mean, you've taught people how to give TED Talks,
yes,
and equip them to do that. And you work with leaders and senior leaders on how to deliver effective messages, everything from speech writing to delivery.
yes.
And you've been on consulting in the space around communication and workplace communication. So I cannot think of a better person to have for this topic.
Well, happy to be here. Can't
Yeah.
think of a better place to be.
Yeah, it's great. So, so before we jump into this topic and kind of go into it, tell my listeners a little bit about your journey. What got you into this?
Okay. Well, it actually started over 30 years ago, and I'm 41, so it makes the story interesting just by the numbers.
Yeah.
But it all started with the Easter play when I was 9 years old. And so I had been doing the Easter play since I was 4. So I was a 5-year veteran at age 9 of the Easter play. But this particular year was different because my Sunday school teacher decided that at 9 years old, it was no longer cute for you to stand up in front of the church and just read the part. So you had to memorize it.
Uh-oh.
Yeah.
So no longer, you can't hold it.
You can't hold it and read it.
You gotta know it.
You got to know it. Yeah. And so for me, I thought, no big deal. She gave me this sheet of paper. It was about half a page long with small type. And I took it home to my mom, and I discovered that it was a really big deal. So in the weeks leading up to this Easter play, my mom drilled the part in me before I could go outside and do fun things. And sometimes even before I could have dinner, I would have to recite that part. And I got so good I could do it almost backwards.
Wow.
But when the big day came, when the big day came, I folded like none other. I think I got 2 words out, which were both Jesus, which were the first words in my part.
Either was part of the part or you were praying.
Either way I was covered. And nothing else came out. And so my grandmother ended up saving me because she just applauded wildly and everyone started applauding. And so I thought, maybe I nailed it. But learned that I didn't. And so afterwards was the lesson from my mom about just the importance of communication. So for me, from a very, very young age, speaking was important.
Yeah.
Yes.
So has it always been part of your career trajectory? Is it always involved some level of communication?
It has. Interestingly, when I look forward, and try to connect those dots, I really couldn't see those things happening. But when I look backwards at my life and some of the different things I did in church and in school and things like that, speaking was sort of always hiding in the background. And as I graduated from college, it came more to the forefront at that time. And then I learned that when you can speak well, people give you credit for being a lot smarter than you are. So for me, that worked really well. I figured, like, if I figure out this speaking thing, then maybe I don't have to be as smart. So I kind of use it as my secret weapon in that way.
I have members of my family that use that as their secret weapon.
Yeah, I think a lot of leaders in our country use that as their secret weapon as well.
Yeah, my youngest Aaron, I just love him. He's great, and he'll say all these things. It sounds so smart, and he'll be around the dinner table with the rest of his siblings. So his sister Abby, who's 17, will say to him, she'll say, "Wait a minute. Where'd you come up with that? You made that up, didn't you?" So we call it Aaron facts.
Right.
But he delivers it in such a convincing way that you say, "Oh, that must be true."
It has to be true. How could it come out so eloquently if it's not true?
All right, so let's talk a little bit about the workplace today.
Sure.
So I know you've been brought in so many different environments and so many different reasons. So what are some of the big kind of problems or needs that you're seeing in the workplace today?
Well, the most interesting thing I see in the workplace is just the effects of social media.
Yeah.
So today's audiences have really short attention spans, meaning that they're not going to listen to you for a long time if you're not particularly interesting. And
Sorry, what were we saying?
See, exactly. I'm working on it here. And then on top of that, they have extremely high expectations. So if you're communicating, whether you're presenting on a large stage or if you're a leader talking to a small, team within your company or organization, you have to be good and you have to be fast. And so in order to do those things, you just have to have some of the basic skills, to be able to connect with individuals.
Okay, so it's short attention span. So I get that. So it's got to be super, super tight.
Yes.
And I remember, so I wish I had known you when I did my TED Talk, because I did my TED Talk some years ago.
You can do more than one, right?
Well, next time if I ever get asked to do one,
okay,
I'm calling you.
We can work on that.
I
can get you asked, I think.
Oh, that would be awesome. I think good things are happening on the show today, folks. This is great. But I remember when I did it, they said, okay, TED Talks go 20 minutes, but what we're finding is viewership drops off after 15. Right. Now, that was when I did it, which was like 3 years ago.
Wow.
The next year, they were telling people viewership now drops off after 10 minutes.
Wow.
So keep it shorter and shorter and shorter.
Right.
So I totally get the whole thing of keeping it short. Mm-hmm. You said something else, though, there, too. You said, but you got to be good.
You have to be good.
What does that mean? What is good?
What does it mean to be good?
Yeah.
So what it means to be a good communicator is you have to connect. And I found over the years that listening instead of speaking is actually the thing that gets you connected and will have people to listen to you. So I think no matter what capacity you're in terms of leadership, when communication is involved, if you listen first, then it increases the odds that you can speak directly to the issue that the person is facing. And it gives you a little more bandwidth as far as attention is concerned.
So connect. So we could say that it could be listening. It can also even be trying to make it about the audience or make it about whoever.
Absolutely. It's always about the audience. So it's always about the other person that you're speaking to.
Okay. So, I do end up with clients that are saying, I got promoted to this new role. So when I'm doing coaching, it'd be like transition coaching, helping them equip them for those new roles.
Yes.
And sometimes part of their issue is, particularly with my technical clients, so like your accountants, your IT folks, you're nodding your head, yes. You're smiling for people who can't see Dez when you're listening. He knows where this is going.
Yes, I do.
And they're like, okay, now I got to give these presentations, like senior level presentations.
Yes.
And I've been told I'm not very good at it. So for people who are listening right now, who maybe find themselves in that role where they've got to start giving more senior level presentations, do you have any good kind of tips or tricks that would help them start to think about how to do that better?
I do. So I think the first thing that you should do is watch speakers. So we talked about TED Talks. And so a great place to go is to just watch TED Talks and watch different speakers, because obviously different speakers have different styles. And so what I would encourage people to do who are new to presenting is just look at some different folks, look at some variety of styles, and then pick a few characteristics or things that you feel work for you. And then one at a time, try to incorporate those things into your presentation. I think if we had to say, what is the blanket thing that you would say that all communicators need to do? I would say be better at telling stories. And when I mention stories, it doesn't have to be a sort of Days of Our Lives or Young and the Restless long, hour-long story, but just a small vignette, enough to give color to a particular point. And I think when you can do that, then, you'll find yourself being effective. As far as my secret weapon in communications, one of the things that I always do and I encourage others to do. You look like you're ready to write something down here, Brandon.
I know the secret weapon. I'm looking around. I'm like, I want to
the secret
make
weapon,
sure no one's listening.
The secret weapon, well, we're kind of in trouble here with these microphones.
We are.
The secret weapon for me is to ask people to tell me what you heard, right? So if you and I are having a conversation and you're the leader, and let's say that you're communicating with me, and after you're done communicating to me, I always ask folks, hey, Brandon, or hey, Dez, tell me what you heard, because I find that the breakdown in communication a lot of times is just because, you said one thing, but the person you're speaking to heard something totally different. And so when you walk away from that conversation, you leave thinking that the intention is one thing. The other person thinks the intention is something else. And the communication typically breaks down there. So by just incorporating that simple phrase, tell me what you heard, and giving people a few seconds to respond to you, you'll at least know that you're on the same page as far as what you're communicating.
Yeah, I had someone who told me something like this years ago. He'd worked for, actually it was GE, and it was some global role he had. And so they had manufacturing facilities all over the world. And there was a particular manufacturing facility in an Asian country that he was over. And in that country, it was appropriate. He learned that it was the cultural norm to just say yes, yes, yes. So he would say all the things he wanted them to do, and they'd say yes, yes, yes. And then he'd look over the numbers each month and be like, "This is not going well at all. What's going on?"
He's saying no, no, no,
and
right?
And then he kept saying,
yeah.
And then he'd tell them again what to do, and they'd say yes, yes, yes. Well, one day he realized, I'm not sure if they're understanding what I'm actually saying for them to do,
right?
Because he didn't speak their language and they didn't speak English particularly well. So one day he said something like that. He's like, "What did you hear?" And he was shocked that what they said back was not at all what he had said.
It's always amazing. And I always tell my clients, I think that kids are proof that this theory is true.
Amen,
right? If you
brother.
have a child, they live to prove to you that you can say one thing and they can hear
thing.
something totally different.
And my wife can attest to this, that I will say that to my kids, particularly when when we had the same conversation before.
Right, exactly.
I'll say, okay, now what did I just say to you?
Right.
Play back to me what you just heard me say. I want to hear it come out of your mouth.
So you already got this. You know my best secret.
That's right. Learned the hard way, my friend.
So this sounds like the key to communications is being a good parent.
Well, I think, or maybe being a good parent is being a good communicator.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I think
your kids will force you into it, definitely.
Oh, yeah. You're going to learn one way or the other.
Right.
Absolutely. Okay. All right. So we've got enough time for one more question before we roll into break.
Sure.
What is your view on PowerPoint and using slides? Do you have a particular opinion, preference? And if you do, if you say you do like to use slides and are okay with it, any kind of tips you have on how people should use them properly?
Yes. So I absolutely love PowerPoint. And I know that there's this huge push and death by PowerPoint and all of those things.
I like PowerPoint, but I didn't want to tell anybody.
Yeah, well,
because I'll get in trouble. Well, we'll be like, that's horrible.
I'll just say Dez told me.
Dez told me it's okay.
It's okay. Yeah, and the reason why people suffer through PowerPoint is because they use it wrong. People put all these bullets on a slide, and it's like, hey, if you wanted me to read it, why didn't you just send it to me, right? And I could save the time from being here. So one of the things in my process is I kind of look at using the PowerPoint as choreography with the presentation. And so when I present, like, my slides are on click, basically with the word. Now, of course, that's going to take a lot of practice. One of the things that I do with slides, let me step back. So I think something that's important is less words, more images, number one. Yeah. So less words on a slide.
Totally true today, right?
Right,
particularly
absolutely.
You see that with social media. You see.
Right. And what people don't get with that is a heavier burden on the presenter, because if I can't look at anything and read it, then that means I got to know this stuff, right? It's got to be in my head. But serving your audience, that's certainly the best way to go. Now, my trick with PowerPoint is I put blank slides, black slides throughout my presentation. And so as I'm going through a presentation, you'll notice that my screen will go blank several times throughout the presentation. The reason for that is I want to control the audience's attention. So if I click a black slide and there's nothing on the screen for them to look at, then their only choice is to listen to me. And so I don't want to compete with the slide. So if you take the PowerPoint to that level and have images, and it's also tightly choreographed with your presentation, it can be masterful, particularly for those people who are visual learners.
That is a sweet secret weapon. That is a sweet secret weapon. I love that.
It works.
I'm doing that. Okay, nice. I've got more questions for you. We've hit break. So when we come back from break, so hold tight. When we come back from break, we're going to pick up where we left off. I'm going to pepper Dez with more questions on communication and how we do this really well, because man, we need it. We need it now more than ever. So stay tuned. We'll be right back. Here's your coaching minute for the week, presented to you by the Leadership Foundry. Dysfunction in the workplace, it's a pervasive problem. Here's a simple tip to eliminate dysfunction, both in your team, but even in the environments around you. Clarify your team members' roles, goals, and responsibilities. So just spend some time thinking about, does all of my team know? Does each of them know what their role is, what the goals are of the team, and their responsibilities? If the answer is yes, you right there eliminate 50% of all the dysfunction that could come up in your team. If the answer is no, think about how you could do that better. When we don't do that, one of two things happens. Either people overlap work and they step on each other's toes, or you have one person carrying much bigger load while a couple other people are hanging out not doing near as much work. It's one of the big problems in the nonprofit world, is a lack of clarity around roles, goals, and responsibilities. So focus on those three things, and I promise you, not only will you eliminate dysfunction, it's going to make your workplace that much more enjoyable. Welcome back from the break. Of course, this is the Brandon Smith Show, and I'm your host, Brandon Smith. And today, the amazing, incredible Dez Thornton is guiding us through communication. And how do we do that better as leaders and managers and parents and every other kind of hat we can wear in the world. So we were talking right before the break, and we were talking about PowerPoint.
Yes.
You gave like some really cool, I hope everyone was listening, by the way, because he gave master tips. So that's like a master class on PowerPoint.
Yes.
Because not only did you talk about using images and not words, but then you even went down to the choreography and the timing, and even using like blank or black slides to make the audience focus on you.
Absolutely. I'll take that one point a step further.
Okay.
So on most remote controls, there is a button that you can click to black out the slide. Now, the reason I don't fool with that button is because when you're actually presenting and you're in the moment, you could hit the wrong button. And so I want to narrow my probability for error. And so that way, by having the black slides in the presentation, the only button I'm worried about is advancing the slide. And I know when those black slides come up, then, of course, I have the audience's attention. They're looking at me. So typically when I'm reinforcing a point, then I'll have the slide go black. Or if I'm telling a story, I'll have the slide go black as well, because I want the audience to be focused on me. So that way, when something pops up on the screen, their eyes are drawn to it for a second or two, but I'm dialed in terms of how long I'm leaving that information on the screen.
Okay, so a few more questions. I want to stay on this idea of formal presentations or big deal presentations. Maybe it's a better way to kind of label it just for a little bit longer. Because it's something I never covered on my show, and yet people deal with that. You have to give these big presentations. You don't want to screw it up. So how about those people that have to present technical information?
Yes.
Your finance people or IT people. And we know those people, and the way they've been trained or part of the way their brain is wired is more is better.
Right.
So they will data dump on this stuff.
Yes.
How do you help them? How do you help them kind of navigate that? Yeah, you're in a technical role. You got to communicate this stuff, but don't kill the audience.
Right. So I guess the first thing that I do in those situations where someone is highly technical, whether it be someone in finance or either an attorney, the thing that I would be pushing for as soon as possible is to get them on video. And what I want to do is I want to record them giving their presentation as they normally would. Then I'm going to ask them to incorporate a short story vignette into that exact same presentation, which I'll record. And then I'll show them both. And then I'll let them make a choice, like which one of these two is more engaging for you. And if they select the right one, which most of the time they do, if they're being fair, then now I have a legitimate case that they've given me to incorporate story
Nice.
into their presentation. And so what I tell folks when they're dealing with a lot of numbers is make the numbers come to life, right? So for example, I was just working with a client last week and he was using the figure that there are 7.5 billion people in the world. And I'm like, okay, 7.5, that's an extremely large number. So what is that going to mean to the people that you're talking to? And so then we took it a step further and said, if those 7.5 billion people were to stand shoulder to shoulder, they could circle the earth nearly 80 times, right? So now it takes that number, which is not interesting, 7.5 billion people. Is like, what does that mean? Well, now we put these people shoulder to shoulder and circle them around the globe, and they can go around the globe 80 times. So just that interesting fact in itself will pull, the audience in a little bit further because it's giving a little color, a little context to what you're talking about. And then once you have them there, then you just continue to go forth. So you need what we call in the industry bathroom blockers. So the more technical your presentation, the more you have to strategically put those points in that are going to just give some color context to the numbers that you're using.
Nice. Okay. So now if we've got people listening right now and they say to themselves, all right, I'm learning a lot from Dez and I'm learning a lot about how I should need to think about my slides and that part of the craft. And they want to get better as a speaker. What are some things they could be doing to get better?
Well, one thing we mentioned earlier, which is watch other speakers.
Yeah.
Because when you watch other people, the things that make you laugh or the things that just impress you in terms of their presence, you want to take note of those things and then try to incorporate those things. I would say the biggest deal in terms of becoming a better presenter is focusing on how you think. So I tell my clients that, we're basically thought partners. And so the result of our connection, our relationship is a speech, but I'm actually your thought partner and I'm engaging you, in a thinking process. And what I believe is if I can help you think clearly and if I can create visual images of what you're going to be talking about, then that in itself is going to make you a much better presenter, because most people who aren't great presenters is usually because they're caught up in their heads, right? They're trying to either memorize or they're trying to read the notes that they're talking about. And so your brain cannot focus on these notes and then at the same time focus on your audience. It's like you have to make a choice as a presenter every time. And so on the front end, if we handle that thinking, then it directly affects what comes out in terms of the presentation.
Another brilliant, beautiful point. I mean, so here's why I took away from that. So if you were to ask me, what did you hear in that, Brandon?
What did you hear, Brandon?
This is what I would tell you. I heard, find your stuff. You needed driving that level of clarity and thinking clearly is important. And you need a thought partner to help you with that.
Absolutely.
And so they can hire someone like you to help them, or they need to find someone else that can kind of help them. And way back in the day when I used to teach at, I taught at Emory and Georgia State in their business schools, and I would sign a communication. I'd be teaching a communication class, and I'd sign a presentation they have to do, and I would let them choose.
Right.
Do a presentation on something or you could do something that you don't know.
Right.
And everyone always thought, I'll do the thing that I know.
Right.
But those were harder to do for them.
Absolutely.
Because they knew it so well, they didn't know how to communicate it. They didn't know how to get it. Stuff that they just took for granted, someone who didn't know anything about that thing wouldn't understand.
Right. So what you're talking about is called the curse of knowledge. And so the curse of knowledge basically says once you know something, it's hard to imagine what it's like not to know it. So when you go to explain the most basic thing to someone and you live, breathe, sleep, eat this stuff, every day, you're automatically going to talk over their heads. And so the challenge for a lot of presenters is, and I hate to use this term, but it's kind of dumbing down the information so that you can deliver it to an audience. And so a lot of folks struggle with that.
Yeah. So finding someone that can help you, someone who doesn't know, so you can try and communicate to her or him and have them say, yeah, I don't get that.
Yeah, correct.
Or I think what would help you communicate that better is this image or this story or this idea.
Absolutely. And for me, the starting point in terms of clarity is answering some simple questions. And those questions are, what do I want my audience to know, feel, believe, and do as a result of listening to me?
Okay, hold on. Know, feel,
believe,
and do.
Correct. Now, if you can't answer those questions,
believe and do.
You aren't ready to present because you're not focused and clear on what you want to say. So how can you expect your audience to understand and grasp concepts that aren't clear in your mind? So for me, the starting line with all the folks who I work with who are doing presentations, large and small, is let's identify, what you want the audience to know, feel, believe, and do. So that sort of serves as the controlling idea, the North Star of the presentation. And so when we have a story, for example, or, we have a different point that we want to consider, and it's like, well, should we put this in? It's like, well, is this falling in line with what we want the audience to know, feel, believe, and do? And so what happens is you'll end up with a list of what I call sleepers and a list of keepers. So the sleepers are the points that you wouldn't put into the presentation, and of course the keepers are those that you would add in.
Of that know, feel, believe, and do, is when you're working with clients and you're looking through that lens, those 4 lenses, is there any one of those lenses that seems to be harder for people to get than another, or is it?
I think it just depends on the individual.
Yeah, okay.
So going back to your technical folks, for example, that feeling, that emotion may be hard for them because they're so heady, and they may think, well, I don't care how they feel about it. It's like, as long as they understand it and can move forward or make a decision based on that understanding, then that's good enough. So folks who are kind of linear left brain, like myself, don't tend to, favor those types of stories. And so it works the opposite way as well. You have some people who all they want to do is tell stories and never make a point. And it's like, well, why would people want to listen to you, particularly in a business environment? So I think it just depends on the person. And so I have a process where I try to gauge where people are on that spectrum, and then I, in a nice way, kind of push them in the other direction.
Yeah, nice. Okay. Good, I'm looking at our time. We still have some more time because I got more questions for you.
Okay.
So something I've never, ever been exposed to and never really talked to is someone who actually helps someone write speeches.
Okay.
So when you think about, like, when clients come to you and say, Dez, I really need help. I got to deliver the speech. I could use some help kind of like crafting this thing. Are there certain kinds of general themes you're seeing with your clients recently? And like, are the speeches all about change, or the speeches all about, I don't know what else they'd be?
Well, I work with a wide variety of presenters. So some of them are technical presentations, as you mentioned. So maybe sharing the numbers with the sales team and trying to figure out, how we could do more or how we could do better. And then I also work with, like, the speaker I was working with recently was a diversity and inclusion speaker. And so he was talking about those issues. So it's sort of all over the board for me. And that's the part that makes it interesting. Number one, because every time you present, you got to hit a home run. So you can't get up to the plate and take a day off, when you're on stage. Yeah. So I love that part of it. You always have to bring your A game. And then the other part of it is you can always get better. So I always say that there are 3 presentations. There's the one you give. There's the one you prepare for, there's the one you give, and then there's the one you wish you gave, right? And then every scenario, that always happens, even to the best speakers. I could prepare for a presentation insanely and do what others may feel is a masterful job, but I'll always reflect on it and say, oh, I forgot to say this, or if I would have just said that a little differently, or if I wouldn't have, rushed through the punchline of the joke, it would have been better. I mean, that always exists. And so I just have to reassure my clients that, hey, what we're looking for is a great speech, not a perfect speech, because we're still chasing the perfect speech and no one has captured that yet.
So I'm not the only one that feels this way.
No,
you're saying.
You're not.
It's good.
You're not.
God, I'm feeling better. I know stuff. I'm believing stuff. I'm feeling better.
Exactly. Now I just got to do something.
I got some stuff I can go do.
Right.
This has been successful. Glad everyone got to listen, because this is everything I needed today. This is great.
This is all for you. This is why we're here.
This is great. So I'm watching our time. We're starting to get close to the end.
Okay.
Before we start to pivot towards close, I know we spend a lot of time on big presentations and delivering presentations and speeches and that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And because I know that's very anxiety producing for all of us.
Yes.
In various shapes and ways and forms. Is there any other kind of final communication tip you would want us to think about before we start to move to the life hack?
I would say, just when it comes to communication, particularly presenting, it takes far more time than you can imagine to prepare, and you can't cram for a speech. And so you actually have to set up, I use the term setting up a blueprint of, what's our timeline going to look like for this, to include practice. And no matter, how long you've been doing it, it's just a process. It's such an iterative process that it just takes a long time to do it right. Now, the beauty of it is once you commit to that process, or you have a thought partner a coach that you've gone through it with, then it certainly gets easier along the way. But it's just one of those things where it's going to take time, and there's a direct correlation between, this will be my last point here. So there's a direct correlation between what you put in and what you get out, just like everything else in life. And to borrow from one of my speaking mentors, the more that you sweat in private, the less you bleed in public.
Oh, that's the more you sweat in private,
The less you bleed in public. Yes.
Amen. 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 You're preaching well today. Let me just tell you. Okay, so I ask all of my all my guests this. Probably ask my clients this too. But all my guests, what is one life hack you have for us? Something that we can be doing personally or professionally that will help us live a life more free from dysfunction.
I think the one thing that you can do from a communication standpoint, we actually mentioned earlier, and that is to ask people what they heard.
Yeah.
Because that will make sure that you're on the same page and that you're clear. And an interesting way to do that is if you're in a meeting with someone, let's say you're sitting across the table from them and you're having this meeting, just push a sheet of paper over to them and say, all right, write down the top 3 things that you just heard me say. And number one, the reaction on their face will totally amuse you. And then secondly, you'll be amused by what they write down because usually it's not even close to what you were actually saying. And I think just if you were to do that in a corporation or a one-on-one environment, you'll get to see the gaps that exist in communication. And so the key to being successful in communication is just closing that gap between what's said and what's heard.
Nice. I love it. Dez, you're awesome, man. You're awesome. So if people want to learn more about you and either reach out to you or learn more about the work that you're doing, where can they go?
Absolutely. Well, I hang out on LinkedIn for the most part, and your wife was successful in finding me there.
Yeah.
So I'm Dez, D-E-Z, Thornton, Thornton on LinkedIn. And there I publish articles weekly with just different communication tips, some of the things that we've talked about today. So happy to connect with anyone from your audience. And if I can help in any way, thought partnership, happy to do it.
Oh, awesome. Fantastic. Well, that's great. And like I said, I mean, this has already been super valuable. And you didn't mention your website, but your website's great too. And
well, thank you. It's
got great resources there, and then people can sign up to receive your blog.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I found it simply by typing in your name.
Yeah.
Dez Thornton, and it came right up.
Yeah, that's strategic. Someone told me I'm supposed to do that, and it worked.
It did. It was good.
So my mentor told me, you want people to say, hey, get me Dez Thornton. Not, so if you say it by name, supposedly that means something. So I followed it, and it's working. Look where I ended up on the Brandon Smith Show.
Look at this.
I've arrived.
And thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. Catch a new show each Sunday at 7:30 p.m. On iTunes, thebrandonsmithshow.com, and live on facebook.com/Brandon Smith WPT for Workplace Therapist. If you haven't been to the Workplace Therapist site, check it out. It's got not only the old shows that are always relevant, but it's got blogs and other resources and tools just for you. And if you've enjoyed today's show, and we certainly hope you have, please rate, review, and subscribe on iTunes. It's how we grow our followers, grow our tribe, and spread the good news that the workplace does not have to be dysfunctional. So until our paths cross again, have a great week and an awesome life.